So Cindy, for those that didn't get a chance to see our episode last week, can you give us a brief intro of your background and, why you're involved in ergonomics?
Yes, thank you for having me here again today. I love this topic.
So of course.
My background is basically in the physical therapy area. I've been in higher education in the business of ergonomics, and now I have my own business called Cascade Ergonomics, which I love. And one of the reasons that I ended up being very interested in loving ergonomics was way back when I found how much ergonomic issues make such a huge impact in people's recovery, even when they're in physical therapy. And injuries are not good for productivity or for quality of life. And once we found out that we could just jump in and help people at their work site and make rapid improvements, that really got me interested, because in one visit, we can make the type of progress that you could with several physical therapy visits, but it would stay. So that's what really first drew my interest, is how much we have to offer in that area.
That's so great. And I know we talked about it last time a little bit too, that it's always about helping people. And I think that's what really gets people engaged in ergonomics. And I don't know if you knew this about me or not, but we talked about how I got into ergonomics last time. But one of the reasons why it's so meaningful to me personally is that when I was in my early 20s, I was involved in multiple car accidents within a year. I promise I'm not a horrible driver. I always have to preface that. But it really screwed up my back. And, being in your early 20s, wondering, how am I supposed to go through life like this? So through the help of the chiropractor that I was working for and hearing that buzzword of ergonomics, we trialed and errored a lot of movement techniques and postural techniques related to ergonomics, and really seeing that lasting difference you could carry into your everyday life sold me. And that's typically when I was in consulting as well. Having those small differences throughout the day that really make that lasting impression, it truly makes people a believer in ergonomics and why it's important to have that incorporated. So, like I said, besides the fact that that's where my passion comes from, I do work for Kensington now as the ergonomic category manager, but I'm certainly passionate about the topic that we're talking about today. And I do believe that it affects so many people out there. So today we're actually going to be talking about that buzzword that, whether you've been affected by it personally, for anyone watching, or know someone, it's almost guaranteed you are aware of what this is. But Cindy, can you give us a little bit of a definition about our topic today of what is carpal tunnel and carpal tunnel syndrome?
Yes, this is something that we really like to see prevented. Many cases of carpal tunnel syndrome are preventable. And a lot of people have hand and wrist discomfort and wonder, gosh, is this carpal tunnel syndrome? What is it? This can come from all areas of life. It's something that's considered a musculoskeletal injury, meaning the muscles, the tendons, the skeletal system are involved. And what it usually includes, if I show you the general area where people have symptoms, is a pain that develops, sometimes pain. Some people have swelling as it progresses. It can happen in through the wrist and the hand area. The discomfort can spread into the hands and fingers. And as it gets worse or progresses or swelling increases, you tend to develop some numbness and tingling in the thumb and the first three fingers, not usually the pinky finger. It's very specific because the nerve comes down this side of the hand, and it's basically inflammation of a nerve that runs from your neck all the way down your arm up through your palm to your fingers. So as it progresses, it can become disabling. It can cause not just pain and discomfort, numbness and tingling. It can wake you up at night because we tend to sleep with our fingers closed or our wrist bent. And once you're inflamed and swollen in here, since it's such a tiny space right here, all it takes is a little bit of flexion to pinch off that circulation further. And then as it progresses, people can develop weakness and wasting of the muscles in here if they choose not to treat it or address it. They can start dropping items. That's what a lot of people say is, gosh, I'm clumsy. I pick things up and I don't have any strength. I drop everything. And the carpal tunnel itself is a little ligament right here that holds everything in that tunnel. So if you picture, your fingers have tendons that run all the way down through here that help flex your fingers. They go through that tunnel and they come down and attach at your elbow, most of them. So underneath those tendons, at the very bottom of the tunnel lies that nerve. So if those tendons get inflamed, irritated, swollen, they thicken, they put pressure right on that nerve under there. And so does any fluid. And that's where the irritation comes from. And it can come on suddenly. I've seen cases, it can build up gradually in people, but it's something you don't want to let it go. You want to jump in as soon as you can for the best outcome and prevent it from worsening. And most of us tend to just say, oh, that's just a normal ache and pain that comes with work. But the longer it goes on, the worse it becomes, the harder it is to reverse. It can actually become permanent or get to the point where you have to have surgery if you don't stop those symptoms.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation for it, Cindy, and I appreciate just walking through, how it's caused, and certainly agree that prevention of this is definitely the best way to go, but stopping it as soon as you start feeling those slight tingling or numbness type feelings is certainly the best way to go forward. One of the easiest analogies that I've explained carpal tunnel to people too, which if we have anybody that's listening that's in the ergo field, would love to know how you might explain it too. But I've always explained it just as very simple, saying your wrist is like a hose. And so those tendons that run through the carpal tunnel area, if you think about using a gardening hose and your hose suddenly gets a kink or a bend, then it's automatically applying pressure to that area, which you're going to notice a difference in the outcome of the amount of water that comes out of there. So I've tried to say that just as a really relatable way to understand the outcome. Otherwise, sometimes people don't understand everything that goes into the inside of our body because it's not a cut. And it's that inside, those nerve type feelings or those tendons are certainly hurting, but we don't necessarily see the discomfort. We feel it. So just trying to utilize that analogy there. So Cindy, just so you know too, we have people viewing from all over the world today. So we've had people that have said they're viewing from California and then all the way over in France. If you're somewhere else out in the world, feel free to drop a comment to let us know where you are viewing from. And you're welcome to ask us questions in the comments. We will see them and we'll try to address them as we're able to throughout the broadcast today too. So can you tell me, Cindy, a little bit about why carpal tunnel is so common as far as like an office-related injury or just a life injury that we see today?
It is common in the office. And if you think about it, then one of the number one causes, there are a couple, but one of the top causes can be lots of rapid, repetitive wrist and finger motions. Think of typing, for instance, or clicking a mouse. The average typing speed for a person is around 40 words a minute, so I'm told. And if you take the average word length being about 5 letters and you multiply that by 8 hours a day, if someone has a 10-hour-a-day job, they could be typing easily 8 hours a day. You're looking at just under 100,000 rapid repetitive motions in these poor hands and fingers a day. So that kind of brings it to light, how that can happen. The other thing, there can be contact stresses where your palm of your hand or your forearm are contacting a hard desk surface, or something is pushing into this area, and that can irritate those tissues. So it can be overuse irritation, fatigue, contact stress. Luckily in the office, we don't have some of the other stresses that can cause it, such as vibration and like really forceful gripping. But if you have equipment like a keyboard that's really stiff and low quality, or you have a mouse that the buttons are hard to push, it's kind of a low quality mouse, or the scroll wheel is hard, that can really increase the forceful gripping and motions as well. So you want to be sure your equipment's not causing that. And that's why you want to know you're getting good quality name brand equipment. Studies have also shown, I know the insurance companies and the medical community, they use studies that show that a lot of people are born with a little bit of a predisposition, like a narrower carpal tunnel, so they might get it easier and faster than somebody else that has a wider carpal tunnel space. So those are the factors that might bring them on. And there are lots of factors with our desk setup, but I'll just pause there.
Yeah, I think I might know a company that might have some good product recommendations, Cindy, for some nice mice and keyboards that we'll talk to some Kensington products here in a little bit. But yeah, definitely, I think it is the most common thing that I always saw when I was in my consulting days. And I'm sure for you as a physical therapist and ergonomic specialist there, it's something you hear about daily. That being said, how do you feel like mobile technology, like our smartphones and that type of thing, do you think that plays into the carpal tunnel syndrome epidemic? Or is that more related to like the epicondylitis or some of those other elbow or forearm related injuries that we see?
Well, it definitely adds on to the amount of time. And I'm not sure how many people have experienced this. Probably most people, if you hold on to your phone for a long period of time, just holding it up, the act of holding it up can make your hand go to sleep or get tingly. So that's definitely a contributing factor, depending how much time you spend on your smartphone. And this is shocking, but the average person on and off their smartphone throughout the day, listening to podcasts, listening to whatever they listen to, talking on the phone, is actually using their smartphones close to 4 to 5 hours a day. And you stop and you think, no way, but you start adding up all those little phone checks we do through the day and jogging with our phones. And I mean, if we're holding them some of that time, that's a lot of time to add to it.
Yeah, I get those screen reports on my iPhone of how much time I used my phone on a daily basis. And I'm always pleased when it goes down, any amount, but it's really embarrassing how many hours a day I am actually on my phone between all of the different activities that I do. And that's not including, typing on my keyboard or clicking my mouse and everything. So, and I will tell you, we've had several other people chime in as far as where they're viewing from. And based on the people that are here today, you are in a great company with really great ergonomists listening into. So feel free to chime in if you do have any comments to add on to this great topic today. I know it's a popular one. So Cindy, what can you tell someone if they're not having any symptoms? How can you prevent carpal tunnel syndrome, or how can you make it kind of slow to start? As I know we age, and the more that we do something, it's going to happen, as you explained. But is there anything we can do on a daily basis, without talking equipment? We'll talk to that in a few minutes. But anything we can do in our daily life that is helpful, maybe some stretches to help or other items?
Yeah, there are quite a few items. And again, when you think of the nerves from the carpal tunnel, they all originate from the neck. So we need healthy posture. We want to try to avoid the tech neck as much as we can and try to make the devices accommodate our bodies, not us accommodate the devices by looking down all the time. So really paying attention to your posture when you're walking around, sitting, using any devices. Maintaining healthy stretches. So for the neck, the chest area through the outlet into your shoulders, healthy stretching into your forearms, hands, and wrists, which I can show you my favorite carpal tunnel stretch here in a second. So, and also giving yourself lots of little intermittent rest breaks. We always talk about rest breaks as ergonomists. The 20-20-20 rule for the eyes is a good rule to adapt for the hands and fingers when you're resting your eyes or you're standing and giving yourself a standing or movement break. Taking that opportunity to let your hands relax and hang down, let the blood flow down into your fingertips, do a few finger movements, stretch them the opposite way that you've been using them. So resting, stretching, maintaining healthy posture. As far as a carpal tunnel stretch, a lot of people love this stretch where they just gently stretch those tendons right here and hold for about 20 seconds. But I like to add one specific piece to that. So if you were to turn the hand upside down instead, and I like to secure the hand against something so the fingers are gently, gently stretched, and then come over and gently take the thumb and just stretch that so that it widens this carpal tunnel. So you fix your fingers against a desk or a wall or something, and then gently pull on that thumb and hold for about 20 seconds. And do that several times a day just to keep this widened out, because we tend to tighten it down and scrunch it like this. And that's really important. Now, the big thing with any of those stretches, people tend to pull too hard when they do them. They just crank on those finger tendons, and that can be really irritating in itself. So if you do that stretch, it's meant to just be gentle and comfortable, should not be painful, and you should not overdo it.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say the same thing, that anytime those stretches are introduced, they automatically try to bend their fingers back so fast, and it makes you want to go, oh, and so that gentle stretch is definitely important. And I know for myself, for just doing those stretches throughout the day, I do know that I have a good setup from an ergonomic perspective, but I still have to take those micro breaks and do those stretches. So I realize I'm not immune to the issue. And I don't know about you, Cindy, but I always dread the day if I have any sort of ergonomic injury due to repetitive stress come into my life, even in the least little way, because we know better. We should be preventing that, but sometimes it is hard to do that. So, well, we've talked about the stretches. We've talked about some other things in our daily life that we can do. So probably my favorite part is to talk about some of the really cool equipment that's out there that can help really prevent some of that stress on the carpal tunnel. So I'll ask you first. I have my favorites, but I'll ask you first if you have any products that you might recommend to someone that is dealing with either like minor carpal tunnel pain or trying to prevent it from coming in altogether.
Absolutely. And before I start with the equipment, in this day and age, nobody should have to continue suffering with this. Even in somebody with advanced carpal tunnel symptoms, there is enough out there to improve your comfort and your quality of life. So we should have something for everybody. With that said, you must use the equipment correctly to get the benefit out of that, because there are people that go out and buy a new mouse or buy a new keyboard and it feels a little more comfortable, but you must use it correctly. So bear that in mind when you do. But if you have the right equipment, it can make your life so much better. And so many of us are just making do with equipment that's not right for us. So make sure that you really pay attention and that you do have the right equipment. There are several different things that are favorites. If someone tends to have symptoms in their mousing hand, what happens is when we're mousing all day long, our hands are in a very closed position. This is the end range of our forearm motion. The other end range, the opposite, is palm up towards the ceiling. So either one of these positions are end range, and end range does put a little stress on your tissues. So when we're mousing all day like this, we are stressing our tissues. So somewhere in the middle between vertical or a handshake relaxed position are our ideal relaxed positions. Plus, if you notice when you're palm down, you've got pressure over your palm when you're using a mouse or a keyboard. When your palm is rotated up a little bit, that relieves the pressure right there. And for a lot of people, that can make 100% difference for them. And if someone is prone to having symptoms come and go, sometimes that's all they need. So we love the vertical mice. Plus, the buttons are so soft and easy to use, and the scroll wheel's easy to use. It's lightweight. And when you get a vertical mouse, you should find something that when you put it in your hand, it just fits like a glove. It just feels natural, because they're not all created equal.
Yeah, isn't it like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, that you can put like 10 different mice on a desktop and then you start feeling each one, and there's that one or two that will just feel amazing from the get-go. Sometimes they might feel a little bit funny if you're not used to mousing vertical, but I think from what I've seen from people trying to switch to vertical, as well as myself, it's one of the easiest transitions to an ergonomic product that's out there, because you're still mousing, clicking left, right finger, and then scroll in the center, but it's just positioning your hand in a little bit better way, so that you're able to relieve some of that stress on the carpal tunnel area. But yeah, Cindy, I do have the same one. Sorry, I'm trying to get that there as you. That's my daily mouse that I use. And as you mentioned, I think that there's honestly no excuse today for not having good ergo products at your desktop. And if there is anybody that's listening in that is like, oh, they're too expensive, or, oh, they're so highly priced, that is something that Kensington really, really strives to do, is to make these products affordable for you to have in your desktop environment, whether it's home, on the go, or in a traditional office there. So any other mice or anything like that that you'd want to recommend, or just the vertical? And that's fine if that's all you have. I will say I have my lovely can of mice that sits on my desk here. And I can tell you the other one that we have is this one that's here, which it's a similar form factor to the first one that you showed. But what we found is that this one's a little dusty because it's been in my can. This one has a really nice long tail on it. And so it really helps fit petite users, versus this other one that I have here is a little bit taller in nature, and it's more semi-vertical. So to me, I found that it fits an average to larger size hand just because of the contouring of it. Other than that, one of the things that I do like to show people, also in my jar of mice here, is that ergonomic equipment does not have to be big and bulky either. So this is our SureTrack mouse. Sorry, I keep going the wrong way. This is our SureTrack mouse. It's just a basic wireless mouse. Now, this is not going to be ergo friendly in the same way that the vertical mouse is going to be. But if you look at the shape, this one is definitely taller, but they're really not that much bigger. So to think that you have an excuse of, I can't bring a mouse with me, it's too big, it's too bulky, these vertical mice are really the same footprint as the generic wireless type mouse that you would normally go pick up. So I always like to tell people there's no excuse these days. And they're honestly, with the different color choices too, pretty cool looking with your computer setup too. So any other products, Cindy, I'm sorry, for carpal tunnel besides mice that you would want to talk about today?
Well, you guys have a nice assortment of ergonomic keyboards designed for this. And what's really important is the ergonomic keyboards also have built-in wrist support, which some ergonomists are in favor of, some may not be, but it's really person-specific. And what I find is so many of us would normally not type with neutral wrists. We tend to, instead of being nice and flat and straight like this, we tend to kind of drag our wrist on the desk surface. We don't want our wrist dragging on a hard desk surface because that's more compression. So if you're not a typist that can keep your palms off the desk, it's really nice to have wrist support there to add that cushion. What it also does is it helps keep your wrist more neutral, so you're not like this. When you're in this position, there's a little more stress going into the wrist, so you want it neutral. And you need wrist rests that are soft, that are not too bulky, because if they're too big and bulky, or they're thicker than the thickness of your keyboard, then you just get more compression in that area. And that's where some problems can occur for people. We don't want more pressure. So it's important that they're either the same thickness as your keyboard, or they're slightly tapered so they're a little more thin. And that's what you get when you buy an ergonomic keyboard. You get that perfectly designed taper. Also with an ergonomic keyboard, you get a little bit more of a relaxed posture. So instead of your hands just being flat in that end range position, you get a little more relaxation there. And it really doesn't take much to get used to. So the material, the shape, the thickness are all very important, and the user typing style and preference.
Awesome. Yeah, those are great tips. It's always a hot topic. We could probably do an entire LinkedIn Live just on proper use for wrist rest and get some heated discussions going on around when you should use them and when you shouldn't use them. So I appreciate the simple tips on that side of it. And I agree that they're not for every single person to use, but if they are used the right way, there's certainly a time and a place with the right wrist rest for that person too. If anyone has any other questions, we did have one come in from James that he would like to know. Let me read it exactly here. So how do you recommend someone going from a palm down traditional type mouse to a relaxed or vertical type mouse? What do you think the progression of number of minutes per day or the percentage of day? How do you get someone acclimated to the vertical type mouse?
Well, for some people, it's easy. They go right to the vertical mouse, and within a matter of a few minutes of just getting used to something feeling different, they're fine. You also can keep both mice on the surface and use one for a certain amount of time, use your standard flatter mouse, and then use the vertical mouse. There's really no stress for most people to just adding a vertical mouse. I'm sure you'll find that one person, that one outlier. And then there are mice that are semi-vertical. So instead of having this vertical type of slope, it's more of a semi-vertical. They're not flat, but they're not vertical. Now that works great for someone who doesn't have symptoms. It really isn't enough for someone who has full carpal tunnel symptoms, full blown. Some people might adapt to it, but it's not ideal. But if you want a mouse that takes you halfway in between, you're a healthy person, you have no wrist issues, and you just want something that relaxes your wrist more, the semi-vertical would be the way to go.
Perfect. Thanks, Cindy. And yeah, I would 100% agree with your recommendations there. Typically, I would tell people with any type of ergonomic solution, you have to give it a minimum of 2 weeks to really get fully acclimated to the new product, because sometimes it can feel a little different. And having the 2 mice plugged in is a great way to still go back and forth. One extra tip I would add to that when someone is using it in an office setting is I would start with using it like for generic tasks like email, where precision isn't necessarily key to get used to the movements. But then as you become more acclimated to it, then you can start going into Excel or your other specific programs that you really have to point and click in that exact space, as sometimes people just feel like it's clunky at first when they're not used to that same type of movement. And I mean, same thing for the ergonomic type keyboards. Kensington actually did a case study on switching to ergonomic keyboards for standard keyboards to see what the acclimation period was and also productivity. And it took about 10 days roughly to get someone fully acclimated. But one of the most surprising findings, I honestly was blown away by it, was that people actually typed 11% faster on the ergonomic keyboard versus a standard keyboard. And these were people that had never used a curved keyboard in their life. So I wish I had that in my bag of tricks when I was consulting to say, you can do this in less than 2 weeks, you could type faster. So I think that's great to know, there's always an acclimation period that's there.
Yes, so keyboards do take a little bit. They take longer. And the standard mice, the other thing you have is a standard mouse, when you move it, you tend to use more wrist motion side to side. You have to try to train yourself to use more arm motion. With the vertical mouse, it's easier to use the arm and shoulder. It's a different motion. Less of it comes from the wrist. People also, when they have really acute symptoms, will tend to sometimes keep a standard mouse on the desk and use it in their opposite hand for a while. And that takes a few days, at least a good 2 days or more to get used to, but that's just another option.
For sure. Well, Cindy, it has been a pleasure having this second session with you. If you guys tuned in late today, just know Cindy and I did a session previously on sitting disease, which you can find. If you go through our LinkedIn profile, you're able to find it that way. But otherwise, it's always a pleasure speaking with you, Cindy. You're such a great knowledge source for all things ergonomic. So I appreciate the time today, and hopefully we can do this again soon.